This is the Troutbitten Podcast.
Troutbitten.
Troutbitten?
Troutbitten.
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 Yeah, Troutbitten.
Troutbitten.
It's about trout. Wild trout. This is Troutbitten.
This is the Troutbitten Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Dominic Swantoski. I'm the owner of Troutbitten and the author of Troutbitten.com. All right, let's talk about fishing big rivers. For the most part, all of us here at Troutbitten are, let's say, river anglers, meaning not too much stillwater. For me, like none at all. Furthermore, we're mostly wade anglers. And by that, I simply mean that we spend most of our time wading rather than floating because we enjoy it. And because in a lot of cases, wading gives us the best chance for success. But over the years, I've definitely noticed some misunderstandings about where and how we fish. I hear from a lot of readers, listeners, and watchers of Troutbitten stuff. And one thing that frequently comes up is an assumption that all of our waters are small to medium sized. Maybe that's because of the videos that we show. Now, Josh is here with me tonight. And I know Josh and I often pick smaller and medium-sized waters. Josh, depth of field and things like that, right? You just like it better.
Lots of reasons, yeah.
Yeah, lots of reasons. But each of us spends plenty of time on big rivers, and we all have our favorite rivers outside of this region. We've all traveled, and even around here, we have opportunities to fish big rivers. So what's big? Well, I'll get the guy's opinion on all this in a moment. But for me, I'll say a big river is one that you could float, right? You could put a boat on there and float down. And it's probably the kind of river where you can't wade all of it. Think about that, right? You can't just wade anywhere you want to go. Now, obviously, some medium-sized rivers could be classified as big rivers during some of the spring flows that we have right now. Much of the discussion that we'll have tonight kind of applies to those scenarios too. Like medium-sized rivers can get pretty big where you can't wade all of them, and a lot of this stuff's going to apply. So we're here to talk about fishing big water. In previous podcasts, we've spent some time talking about specific tactics and strategies for fishing small water. So now let's do the same thing for big rivers. So each of us has a few tricks and some plans for getting the most out of a big water trip. We've made the mistakes, and we've all shared among ourselves what we eventually learned to not only manage big water, but have some of the best days of the season. So I always say that fishing big water and fishing it well takes a lot of discipline. But what do I mean by that? We'll get to all of that and a lot more in just a moment. Let me first introduce the Troutbitten guys here by asking each of you guys a question from a longtime Troutbitten supporter, David Trensky. Dave emailed me the following. He said, "Hello again, Dom. The streamer episodes from last season really impacted my fly fishing. All of a sudden, I'm looking for reasons to fish a streamer first rather than as a last resort. I know you and Austin touched on this, but I'm wondering if we could get the opinions of everyone in your group. When will you not fish streamers? What water types or conditions do you think just don't work well for streamers? Thanks to all for your efforts on the podcast. My friends and I really enjoy listening." He put 3 reallys. He means it. Thanks,
Seems
Dave.
pretty excited.
Hey, we got Josh Darling on the podcast right here. Josh Darling is back, and it's good to see you, bud.
Good to see you as well. Good to be back.
Good. So will you answer Dave's question just for you personally? When don't you want to fish a streamer?
I think probably a lot of things. Sometimes I don't want to. All of these are going to be sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I don't want to fish a streamer if it's super bright, low water conditions. Like if there's an active hatch, I'm probably not going to be throwing on a streamer.
Yeah.
Super cold water, that kind of thing.
Cool. So you're wrong. And now Deli will tell you why you're wrong.
Let's hear it.
Kidding. Bill Dell right here.
I'm in the same boat as Josh. It's a bunch of maybes. I would think the biggest one is probably temps. Like maybe Josh, let's say like under 38 degrees. I have caught fish on streamers, but I think in all other situations, I feel like I've caught fish on streamers. Like I've had a chance.
Yeah.
You can hunt for the spots that they can be in, but when it's really that cold, I mean, bright sun is often not good.
Yeah.
But if it's bright sun and you have a stream that has a bunch of canopy and a bunch of undercut banks and like different places that fish can hide in an ambush, then it may be good for streamers. So it's, I don't know. But I like fishing streamers, so it's hard for me to find a reason not to fish them at times.
I know what you mean. You'll kind of give it a chance almost any time, right?
Yeah. But I mean, really keyed into bugs, I would say, is another one.
That's
Like
what I
if
was thinking.
But I had one instance where it was like one of my best streamer days, and it was a full blanket sulfur hatch, but it was really high, and
Yep.
so but that's like a 1 in 100 day probably.
I have a memory of Aiden's first brown trout. He was in preschool. I had a great streamer bite in the sun. I picked him up and I said, we're going to fish. And he ended up catching one by himself on a nymph under a bobber, not with a streamer. But they did keep eating
I
the
remember
streamers.
that photo, right?
What's that?
Isn't there a story or a article with that photo in it?
Mm-hmm. Aiden's first brown trout.
That's a
Anybody
nice
out there,
trout.
you can Google it. Maybe I'll leave it in the links. Yeah, it was a nice trout. His first brown trout was like a 16, 17-inch brown trout. I mean, independently caught. Seriously. I was standing behind him. I'm going, that's not a good drift. That's not a good drift. And then the fish ate it. I wasn't saying that out loud, by the way. I'm just thinking like, it won't happen right now. And then it did. And yeah, he's got I have a picture of him holding it like tight up against his chest. Probably not the best way to hold a trout, but hey, give him a break. He was 7 years old.
It was for him.
Swam away just fine.
Yeah.
Actually, it did. We didn't torture that trout too much. Okay, but we might have taken some of its slime coat off. For all you trout do-gooders out there, you can write in a nasty note to 7-year-old Aiden.
Did you wet your hands?
I would torture a trout if it were my son's first brown trout
Right?
on his own.
I know.
Who cares?
I know.
It's just a trout.
There you go. Now, you're going to get nasty letters from trout do-gooders too.
Sure will.
Matt Grobe is falling asleep because this is about streamers, and he doesn't know anything about streamers. Matt Grobe, when will you not fish a streamer?
The only time it's more,
He just
so when I don't fish a streamer, when I know I'm going to catch, let's phrase it this way. When I know I'm going to catch more fish on a streamer than I will nymphing and dry flies, I'll put on a streamer, which is like 3 days a year. So
Learn a
that's
lot like that.
that answers that.
Yeah.
No, it's serious. Like simple breakdown.
Yep.
I'm all
That's
about catching
amazing.
fish.
Grobe's,
right?
Grobe's
So-
the guy in our group that he's not a complete angler, everybody, he's
It's
kind of a one-trick guy.
I'd be glad to say that. I don't need to fish streamers to put fish in the net. And when I do, it'll be in a big river, which is what we're talking about tonight.
cool.
But only when I need to use that tactic. But otherwise I don't use it because I don't think it's in my situation it doesn't bring more fish to the net. I don't need to do it.
We should have a whole podcast on just grilling Matt for his decision of basically not fish streamers. That'd be good, right? The whole episode. Why he's not a complete angler.
Strip.
I love it. Austin, you got anything? Anything we didn't cover? When do you really just not want to fish a streamer? For Dave, give him an answer.
When they're not eating streamers.
Well, that's good.
I'll leave it at that.
I know what you mean. I talk a lot about, I'll fish streamers in almost any condition, almost every day. I do give them a chance. And within 20 or 30 minutes, if I have no action, to me, that's like, they're not really on the streamers. I don't like to force them. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. What's the baby countdown day? How many days you got?
9,
I
10,
was thinking 10, yeah.
10, 9, yeah.
Look at this guy.
Who knows? But that's the the date on paper.
Right. It might be the last time we see you as a
Ever again.
yeah.
It might be the last time we see him.
Right. See you in 18
I'm
years.
out.
I'm out. That's right. Everything's about to change. What a whirlwind. I remember walking out of the hospital. Did I ever tell you guys this? We were in the hospital for like a day and a half. I get out of the hospital, and Becky needed a number of things, before she would get home. And so I just remember walking into Walmart to get these things, the little things we need. And it's like the whole world had changed. Everything was so, I have no way to describe it. I felt like everything had changed. Did you guys feel that way? Matt and Josh, did you have that moment? Or was that just me?
I don't know. When did you, how old were you when you had your first kid?
30 something, 32, 4.
See, I feel like
That's when I stopped.
yeah. And I feel like I waited till I was 39.
We'll see.
So I mentally prepared myself, so none of it was too shocking. Like I was like, all right, I'm ready. You know what I mean? I was like, I'm ready to go all in. So I had less of a change. It would not, because I felt like I was mentally prepared for it.
It's also like you're going through. There's also like a trauma. Birth is like
Yeah. You don't know what I just saw and smelled
Yeah.
and heard. And
yeah.
Oh, come on.
That's what I'm saying. I was like
You're
shocked.
here at the cashier at Walmart, and you're like, you don't know what I just went through.
That's right. You're shocked by the averageness of Walmart. All right. it was odd.
All right.
Yeah.
So,
It's very true. It's like, wow, there's a moment where I'm like, whoo, man.
I know. There's a couple
Your
moments.
your wife's
I'm
a
like,
lot tougher than you.
What's going on? This can't happen. This can't be real. It's like a horror movie.
Oh my God.
It is.
Oh,
It's a beautiful thing, Austin.
It's a miracle of life.
It's a miracle of life. Guys,
miracle.
that's what we have for Dave. Hope that helped you out there, Dave. And I don't know. Don't listen to Matt.
Yeah, I won't. Dave, you won't be hearing me on a skills series on streamers anytime soon.
That's right. All right, let's get to the topic. Here we go. Fishing big rivers. It only makes sense, I guess. We do this a lot by defining the terms, guys. What's big water? I kind of gave my opinion. What is it? What's a big river? What's the gauge?
Maybe something you can't cast across.
Ooh, I like that. What about with a spinning rod? Could you cast across it with a spinning rod?
I mean, I see these people online throwing like hundreds of yards with these big giant balloons. So I don't know if there's anything. Maybe the Atlantic Ocean's about the only thing you can't cast across for some of these people.
So you mean with a fly rod, you can't, naturally cast across with a fly rod?
Yeah, I think that. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. If we had to put feet on it, how wide? Gosh, what a round number general kind of thing, right? 100 feet starts to get big for me. 150.
I was going to say like 150, 200.
Ooh, 200 is getting really big, I think. I will say, I think I and just about everybody out there is a very poor judge of what 200 feet really looks like. I mean, when you're on the water. Just like you ever pick up your fly rod inside and you're like, oh my God, that's so long. The 10 feet is so long when I'm in my living room trying not to hit the ceiling fan. I'm just saying, like, perspective is very different. You could say like, oh, it's 200, anything that's, as wide as or as long as a football field, that's a really wide river. But,
I was gonna say, do you guys even?
Yeah,
That's wide, man.
I know,
Like, you guys,
exactly.
Can you even think of a river that wide?
You can. I mean, out in Montana,
I can.
right.
I'm just
Yeah.
saying, and I can't
Not
think
here, no.
of too many in Pennsylvania.
No.
that are that
Most
wide.
trout rivers are gonna. I mean, anything that wide is not gonna be cold enough, right? Cold enough for long enough.
Right.
Yeah,
Sure.
that's the
And it's
problem
often
with.
pretty flat around here too. If it is that
Yeah.
wide, it's not like it's got a lot of flow in it or varying depths like you do out west, Matt.
Yeah.
That's why I say 150 because like one of our rivers is 120 feet, let's say at its widest, and then comparing that to some other rivers I fished out west, just kind of pushing into that next class is what I would consider to be big.
I know what you mean. There is like another class of river that we don't quite have around here. We talk about going north a lot, and we have 4, drainages, 4 watersheds in northern Pennsylvania, and each of those, the main rivers are pretty wide, right? The bottom of that trout water.
That's true. There are exceptions.
I'd say those are big rivers. In each of those, as they get big, don't hold wild trout very much because they warm up so much throughout the season. Any other mark on what a big river is before we move on?
I think a big river, when I consider a big river is you can fish both banks and it feels like a completely different river on each bank. If I can cross and like fish the river and all the honey holes while waiting, then I would consider that not a big river.
I know.
And when you get into these streams where you got to fish like one bank or one island braid and you spent 5 hours and you haven't even touched the other side of the river that actually has just as much good holding water.
Yeah.
Sometimes I find that as my classification of a big river.
Right on. I was kind of saying that in the intro. I feel like if you can't wade all of it, you're getting into that big river class. If you could float it, you're in that big river class.
Flow volume feels like a decent metric as well.
CFS.
Just, you get into some rivers and it's like even on low flows they're pushing you, and on high flows they're roaring and unwadeable even if they're not that wide.
Mm-hmm. You're almost bringing up the idea that like a deep river could be thought of as a big river just because it's deep.
Sure. Yeah.
But it might not be
absolutely.
real wide. That's interesting. Huh. I always think of a big river as a wider valley.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We've got some though, that, I was just fishing one a couple weeks ago, and I think I told you about this, Tom, but I got into it and I hadn't fished a river that size in a while, like a couple months. And I was like, gosh, I was exhausted. I'm like, this water is just pushing even in the lowest portions. And so working upstream is just a pain. And there are spots that you can't cross, which is rare in our rivers.
Yeah.
And that to me is a big river, but might not apply to everything we're talking about
You
tonight.
better start working out earlier.
Yeah.
Josh gets up at what?
Gotta
5 lately? 5 o'clock? Working
make
out?
it 4, huh?
We meet to film sometimes, and he's like, "Yeah, my legs are a little tired. I got up at 5 and did a double workout." I'm like, "Oh, that's the last thing I want to do when I get up." I just want to get something. I don't know. I'm not a get up and work out guy. I work out like in the middle of the day.
Mm.
Do all my chin ups, Austin. I do them all.
We got.
You know,
I'm not always
I can
like
tell.
Friday. We film on Fridays. And
usually
Fridays before we go out.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just me. I've got like a crew of guys that come over to work out every Friday. And so I'm not all that consistent, but Fridays I am.
I have jokes about your workout buddies, but we'll leave it.
Yeah. Good call. Feels like a it feels like a good call on your part.
Yeah, let's move on. No jokes. If you want to be an efficient and effective angler, you need to have your fly storage dialed in. This not only ensures that you'll have everything the fish want to eat, it also helps you stay focused and organized. Fulling mill fly boxes are designed for just this purpose. With no frills, these boxes are built to work. With custom-made durable polycarbonate shells, Fulling mill fly boxes are lined with dense, slotted foam that holds everything from streamers to tiny nymphs and dries. They feature strong magnetic closures, so they only open when you want them to. From their fly patch, which attaches to your bag, shirt, or waders, to their Tactical Max, which holds 960 flies, Fulling Mill's range of 10 fly boxes has something for every angler. Find them at fullingmill.com or ask for them at your local dealer. Smith Creek has always been about practical, durable gear, and this season they've added 2 more products to the lineup. Smith Creek's Wade Soft EVA wading belt is soft, flexible, and built to move with you, not against you. It cinches down without pinching and holds your gear steady with a tough Duraflex buckle and accessory clip. And if you're looking for an all-purpose carrying knife, Smith Creek's new pike tooth knife kit delivers. The Japanese steel blade comes razor sharp right out of the box, precise enough for streamside tasks and tough enough for camp chores. It includes a waterstone, wrist lanyard, and rugged neoprene sheath that's ready for trail, stream, or camping. So whether you're rigging up or dressing down, Smith Creek's got you covered. Like so many other Smith Creek products, the Wade Soft wading belt and the pike tooth knife kit have found a permanent home in my own fishing kit. Learn more at smithcreek.co. Matt, when you were talking about not being able to fish the other side of the river, for me, the first thing that I think about when I know I'm going to fish a big river is, okay, I have to be disciplined. And as I was thinking about this topic, that's what keeps coming back to my mind is I am more successful on a big river when I am really disciplined. I feel like on a small, medium-sized river, again, because I can wade the whole thing, I can screw up this level, go up into the next level. By level, I just mean, a line of rocks that'll kind of break up this section to that section. 30 yards up, 30 feet up, there's my next level break. Okay, so I kind of fished all this, or I even screwed some of this up, go up to the next level. That was easy. It's like a brand new beginning. I often don't have that kind of opportunity, or not as clear of a line. The level breaks aren't as definite. The structure doesn't call to you as much because a lot of times the water's high and there aren't a ton of prominent rocks. There aren't structures. There aren't things that call to me as often on large rivers that say, fish this right here. With, let's say, lack of prominent structure or as much prominent structure, I feel like I have to make more decisions. Well, here's where I'm going to fish. On a small river, you get undercuts and lots of logs in there on a good one. Pocket water with boulders and rocks and seams and lanes. And the river kind of says, hey, fish right here. You'll be good. Fish right here. And I just kind of follow along. And I don't even think about it a whole lot. On a big river, I got to make those decisions because the structure isn't there. And then I make my decision, and I mean it for a long time. I just kind of catch myself coming out of that plan. I have a plan to fish this inside lane, let's say. It comes around, I'm fishing the inside merger seam. I'm on the shallow side bank. I'm coming in. I just want to fish this one lane. And that lane, though, might be 50. Oh, my. Let's not say 50 yards, but it might be 20, 30 yards up before it kind of just ends up there at the head of it. And my plan is to fish that. And all of a sudden, I find myself trying to fish out into the middle, and I can't get good drifts in the middle. And maybe now I'm starting to wade too far or cast too far. And that's what I mean by discipline. So when I can keep my head in the game and really keep myself dialed in, I talk to myself. I really do. When I talk out loud to myself, I do better. And I got to keep myself in check. Stay disciplined, follow through with the plan.
I like what you said about discipline, because I think that's super important. But I would also disagree with the structure piece. I think there is structure. It's just not as obvious, right? On big rivers, it's just different types of structure. And what you hinted at with the small streams, that structure just like screams at us.
Yeah.
Right? Like it really is like just screaming at you to hit that visible holding lie or hole, or and when you look at a big river and you stand on the bank, sometimes it's very hard to dissect it like we would maybe what we're used to fishing on medium to small rivers. But you just look at for different structure, small benches, lips. There might not just be that major, everything funnels into one holding lie, right? You just got to look at it a little different.
Good call.
And I think, all that can be overwhelming. This goes back to the discipline thing. And so when you first take on a big river, I think it's important to just don't bite off a ton. Just pick that bank, or have a plan with, like you were saying about committing, to certain water types. And if there's anything I've learned fishing big rivers, especially out here, it's you gotta learn a little bit each day and put it together and go back and just cross things off your list, because how big they are and how much holding water there is, and you got to put your time in, and it takes a lot longer to learn these big rivers, in my opinion, than the smaller ones. And that's not to discount small and medium rivers at all, because we all know those are challenging. I just think it's naturally it's more challenging to take on a big river and know it well.
Yeah, there's literally more to learn. You can't just walk all the way through it and learn it, right? We've talked about on small streams, medium streams, and even some larger things when they're almost in drought conditions. You can wade through it and learn all those potholes and try to memory bank where the cuts are and the drop-offs and this and that. But on those biggest rivers, you can't do any of that. So it is going to take a lot longer. That's a good point.
Yeah, small rivers have a way of training you to fish everything, and that's what we've been talking about. But feels like with the bigger rivers, the most helpful thing is to, like, I don't know. When I go to a bigger river, I'm thinking, like, I'm generally gonna look at it before. I'm gonna know where an island is, or a confluence, or some other water source that's feeding into it, something else that gives me some inkling of an idea. Like, I know that there's going to be structure here. And you guys have been talking about getting out of the habit of covering everything. Like, if you can just find one seam that you know is there, in the time that you could take a small stream and dissect it and fish every piece of structure, you might, like, so let's like say that takes 4 hours on a stretch of small stream. Like, that might be how long it takes to cover one seam, in one of these bigger rivers. And so just sticking to a plan like you guys are talking about, and being disciplined to say, this is the seam that I'm fishing today, and I'm going to stick with it. And
this is way different than I fish big rivers. So let me start by,
feels like I still cover everything.
I guess when you guys talk about fishing a small area in a big river, it may be big to your size when you compare it to a small river. A small river, let's say you'd fish a mile of it in an hour, or maybe every 2 hours. Where now you're talking about a bigger river. I'm talking really small, like a brook trout stream. Like, if you're not covering, like a brook trout stream, if you're not covering like a mile of it an hour,
1 mile an hour,
then you're probably not fishing it fast enough, in my opinion. But maybe
so fast.
That's crazy fast, but go ahead.
1 mile. No.
Yeah.
Anyway. Okay. So let's tie it back to our podcast last week.
Yeah.
So
reading water like a trout.
So I think when you scale up, when everything scales up on a bigger river, this becomes exponentially more important, because if you say, hey, I'm going to fish this one seam and I'm going to fish it for 100 yards.
Go ahead.
You're not getting a big enough picture of what's going on in that river. If you think about like the grand scheme of things, you can say, okay, I have fished this, but when you scale that up,
right,
if you that entire and it depends on the fish population in your river. If you're only covering, let's say 100 yards, and you're going to say, I'm going to cover that today, and that's what I'm going to fish, there's a chance that there might only be 2 or 3 fish in that entire 100 yards. That's where I'm saying, like, when I fish these bigger rivers, I guess I still try to fish them at the same pace, which is faster, because if it's physically possible. It depends on your river. So I guess first strategy is if I can't cover that with my legs and moving around in a bigger river system, the first thing I say is, okay, well then I need to float it, because I need to cover more water to be able to really get the amount of fish that I think that is in that river system. Maybe the boat is just transportation. I'm using the boat to say, okay, let me float another mile. Okay, this looks like it should be fishy water. Because if we're really talking 100 feet or bigger rivers, like, I guess I don't fish them in that same manner, where I say, okay, I'm going to fish a small subset of it. Maybe if I'm waiting and I've researched and I know I've got 2 hours to fish, I'm going to go work a small section of a river that I know is going to hold fish. But if it's a new river to me, my first thing is always cover water and learn about that river system.
I don't think I'd argue your results, Bill. Like I can totally see that working for you. I feel like I've seen others try to take that mindset onto big rivers and they become lost. I've seen it just become too much. Like they try to apply that same mindset of a mid-level stream and a small stream into a big stream, and they get their asses kicked. So I don't know. Like I said, I have no doubt that would work for you. I don't know if I would necessarily recommend it to like your average fisherman. I feel like sometimes it's good to go and I'm a fast fisherman as well. I mean, I boogie. I'm in Bill's mindset there. I feel like often people trying to mimic that falter when it comes to some big waters, and they may not get as much out of it as opposed to taking a deep breath, slowing down a little bit, and trying to dissect where those fish are laying with the lack of similar structure like we talked about at the beginning, and trying to figure out, okay, where are these fish laying, right? Like, this is new. I don't have the structure. All of a sudden, there's all these fish laying on an inside bend that looks like there's nothing there. Why is that? And that often can be a case on a big river.
Yeah.
Matt, I felt like I learned that. Maybe that was one of the first lessons I learned when I spent a summer out west. Was I felt overwhelmed by just looking at the surface of the water, and maybe from the surface everything looks the same, and it's like, where are the features? How am I supposed to target? How do I have targets? And what I quickly learned, and what my boss told me, who often showed me around, he said, you got to look through the surface of the water. You know, back home you're used to having more defined features and things. You got to look through to see where the slots are, where the depth changes are, where these more extreme features may exist that aren't obvious on the surface. Yeah. And I really took that to heart and realized that it made a huge difference in like how I could break down water, because I felt like, other than just choosing a lane and going one lane, next lane, next lane, next lane, there was no real intention into what I was doing, but to look through to the bottom and see what's really causing the
I like
water to move.
And I think, I mean, what we're getting at here is regionally, Big water is different regionally, right? That's important. I mean, that's going to be important for all of our listeners to understand is whether east, west, Midwest, South, whatever. South has a bunch of big tailwaters too, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's got different big water,
Oh yeah.
in their mindset. And so I like that advice that your boss gave you, Austin, because it's definitely true out here.
Whether it's after a fishing trip or at a backyard fire, you can bet the Troutbitten crew has a case of New Trail Broken Heels along with us. It's honestly our favorite beer. This hazy IPA is smooth and full-bodied. Hand-selected citra hops lead to notes of bright clementine and juicy ruby red grapefruit. Broken Heels is a keeper. New Trail beer is proudly brewed in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and delivered cold to your favorite craft beer retailer every week. At New Trail, it's not about being the best angler. It's about getting out there. So enjoy nature's moments and reward yourself for a day well fished with New Trail Broken Heels. It's Troutbitten's favorite beer. Tactical Fly Fisher was founded by Fly Fishing Team USA angler Devin Olson to bring anglers cutting-edge gear and techniques inspired by the World Fly Fishing Championships. Tactical Fly Fisher's goal is to supply you with the latest and best fly fishing gear and to help you learn how to use it through their videos and books. Whether you need flies, fly tying supplies, a new rod or reel, or any other fly fishing equipment, they've got you covered. Check them out at tacticalflyfisher.com and use the code TB15 to get 15% off one order, excluding rods, reels, waders, and boots. Visit tacticalflyfisher.com. So I don't know that my pace changes. I don't know that. I feel like I'm still fishing at, let's say, medium fast, right? I think that's my general pace.
Bill's
I
saying
cover
no.
quite a bit of water.
He's shaking his head.
And I don't feel like
she said you're slow.
He says you're slow.
well,
Medium slow.
yeah.
Medium slow.
Because you're always front ending me. So
Medium
I just,
medium tinker. The tinker.
so I feel like my
Medium
pace
tinker.
doesn't actually change. I feel like when I'm on a small stream, I'm working up, but because the valley's larger, then I feel like, well, it changes my perception. You know what I mean? If I'm being disciplined and I'm fishing a dry fly, what are you really going to get for a dead drift on a dry fly? 20 feet, 30 feet? You're getting pretty good if you get, 30, 40 feet out of a riffle of a dry fly drift, right? And if I'm fishing on a small stream, medium stream, then I'm going to ride that lane and get that one lane like 3 or 4 times with that drift. When I'm on a big river, I'm still going to try to just get 20 or 30 feet of a dry fly drift, almost maximum. And then I'll get that 3 or 4 times. And then I'm moving up. It just feels like I'm not moving that fast. You know what I mean? Because the perception is, you're like, man, I'm not even close to the head of this lane, I feel like I don't actually change my pace that much. I'm not sitting there fishing one lane or whatever. I think the danger, like Matt, you were saying, of getting lost is like for me, I feel like it can get scattered. You could start just, you're scattering casts everywhere. Let me try this. Let me try that. Let me try this. And this would, I get back to discipline. For me, it's that staying in one, making a plan, staying in, picking a lane, fishing it well, and then I'll fish the next one. But it's not like I'm sitting in one spot for too long.
Sometimes too, those big rivers can force you like into fishing close too at the same time. So some of the rivers out west, like Matt, one of the ones that you and I both fished, and you recommended a section to me one day where basically if you step off the bank, you're going to be over your head.
Yeah.
And you don't have the option to try to wade and to reach that far. But if you know your river well enough and you know some of the, let's say some bankside structure or rocks or whatever it might be, you can potentially stay like right on the river's edge and be successful. But that kind of goes back to the previous podcast about, podcast or two back now about river knowledge. There's a lot you can do.
Yeah, I was gonna say if you can't see the structure, like maybe it's just off color enough that you can't, and it's a big enough river that you can't. You've got guaranteed structure on either side, no matter what.
Yeah,
and so there's always structure there. You've always got undercuts and drop offs right on the bank. You've always got current seams right on the bank. You can always go to those things and be guaranteed some level of success.
I'll tell you what, big river that you don't know, you've never been there, and it's really dirty and you can't see the bottom. Right?
Thanks.
It's pretty tough. That's a pretty tough spot, right?
Yeah, that's rough. And, unless for whatever reason they're pushed to the banks, all of the fish, right? Then you can kind of just cruise up the banks in that soft water and do that. But yeah, man, that's good luck. that's
I know.
challenging.
That's when I get lost. That's discouraging too. If you fish for an hour and you don't even bump anything, it's hard to make yourself believe that there's fish in there. Like Bill, you said, there could just be, and realistically, there might only be 2 in that one section that you pick. You're like, oh boy.
Yeah. And we're talking about wade fish in these big rivers too, right? Like
right.
if you have the opportunity,
yeah.
We haven't talked about floating, but for me, sometimes that floating, now this gets into what Bill was talking about. All of a sudden you have a vessel that lets you cover a ton of water and learn a little bit, on a big piece of real estate. I can't tell you how many times I've been able to do that and learn something and actually translate that into my wade game. A week later, you come back or you visit it. Oh, I remember this bank, we did well here and it fished well, and it can kind of help your learning curve. And you're in a boat, right? You're not rushing anything. You're kind of just doing what naturally the boat allows you to do, which is cover a bunch of water. I would say that can be a benefit, to tackling these big rivers if you have the opportunity, is to see it by boat.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I'll mention is, look, every season's different, but if you're able to be in a boat, during a hatch, all of a sudden those fish give themselves up where their lies are if they're eating on the surface.
Oh yeah.
That can be a very major benefit and quicken the learning curve on some of these rivers when they give themselves up, and all of a sudden you're like, why are all they're all mid-river. Here I am throwing everything on the bank, and I look behind me and there's constant fish rising mid-river on these subtle breaks and whatnot. So those would be two things you could use to quicken your learning.
Let me ask you this. You guys have all, floated rivers where lots of people float. You think in the most popular times when we're seeing a lot of boats and all people do is hit the banks, because really it often is the best thing. You think trout are moving into the center on a regular basis?
Maybe.
Maybe.
It depends I think boat traffic can push fish around. I've seen there's like a volume, I guess, of boats, like where if they're not used to seeing them, or maybe they're used to seeing them, it can affect them differently. I've seen kayaks or drift boats or rafts come over top, and then 5 minutes later, fish are back up and rising.
Oh yeah.
And I've seen the opposite where they've gone over and it's been dead sea for, and then I have to leave and go somewhere else too.
Dead sea.
I think we kind of touched base on like just what trout like last week. Was it last week with the shelters? Just what,
was it?
Yeah.
Reading the water like trout.
Reading the water. I think, look, if you read the water and you got good depth on that bank and good structure, I don't think those fish leave. I think they hunker down more than escape when the structure's good. Well, I think when the water becomes low, that's a whole other ball game, right? If they have nowhere to hide, then they're gonna kind of get out of there.
Like Bill said, I mean, it's gonna obviously the river is gonna matter a lot when it comes to that question. I just asked because I was listening to another podcast and they were talking about how that happens. That now the trout are all in the middle. They didn't say that exactly, but a lot of the trout now are in the middle because they're getting beat up on the sides.
Well,
and I think that primarily I feel like I don't necessarily see that because I've tried to force it into the middle. Although I've never floated an area that had like 40 boats a day. Never. I really haven't.
Yeah, so it's very prominent or prevalent out here. I mean, dude, 40 boats, try about like hundreds of boats.
Yeah.
And I always argue that people that say that, right, the people that are like, oh, they're moving in the middle. I'm like, are they? Or are they just more active in the middle because no one's fished for them?
Yeah,
like,
sure.
I think that's more relevant than all of a sudden the fish are like, oh, I'm going to go into the middle of the river because of X, Y, and Z. It's just the fact that, hey, I decided to throw a mid-river today, and the 4 fish that didn't see a fly ate mine. Like, that's what I think.
Yeah. Everything works sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
Matt, you touched on this a little bit in your descriptions. I think bugs, if you know a river has a really good hatch, I think that can really help your learning curve because
Mhm.
the fish, they give themselves away where they're at that point, if they're rising at that point. And so I think that can help figure out, oh, the fish are rising. Okay, there's obviously fish here. Some rivers you have to figure out if they're trout or they're fall fish or they're bass.
That's a good point.
Great point.
Anything could be rising.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah, if you've ever stocked and worked
Oh,
a
yeah.
nice 16-inch fall fish,
Fall fish. Exactly.
you learn that they have a little different rise form than a trout.
Yeah.
Eventually, or you just keep, wasting your day.
It's not wasted, right? Caught a trophy fall
Native.
fish.
Yeah.
Native fish.
Native fish.
fall fish. Pennsylvania tarpon. They got those big scales. That's what I call them. Little tarpon, man.
That is what they look like.
A little bit, yeah. Fall fish. That's what I got my boys into dry fly fishing on for the first time. Just some eager fall fish. They were just willing to, eat a dragging fly across the top. That's how Josh gets into good action, right?
So right.
Where you live now, you just go down the road, feed up on some stockies. Later on, you'll be getting the fall fish. Good for you, right? You're gonna learn so much.
Yep.
One other thing I see people do with we'll bring it back to the Big River conversation. I think people get their confidence wavers quickly.
Yeah, mine does.
Right? And it
Yep.
throws you off for some reason. You can talk about what we mentioned, is it being overwhelmed or is it lack of confidence? But I feel like people want to throw on like big flies and cover a bunch of water. And I'm not saying that's a bad, because sometimes it works, right? But often it's, you're still trying to put the flies in the feeding lane of trout, right? And so whether that's small flies, you can still use small flies. You can still get small flies down. I think folks think often the current tends to be bigger, and so it's harder to get flies down. So one of my recommendations to folks, your fly selection and patterns, they might not be the best fit for these big rivers because the current's bigger, because you need maybe a little more time to get down because the river's so big. So just don't assume that the fly box, and I'm not talking about pattern, like the build of a pattern, right? We know confidence flies are confidence flies. I'm just saying the amount of weight. I would bet people undergunned. Like one of the things I notice out here is people are undergunned with their flies selection with weight. I guess is what I'm getting at, right? You need sometimes, not all the time, but often bigger rivers have bigger currents, and you need more weight to get down into the zone. Do you guys see that at all, or do you find yourselves tying maybe a little bit different for certain rivers, or maybe not?
Yeah.
Big rivers.
I mostly tie. I would say I tie heavier than most folks, and I fish probably bigger and heavier flies. And so some of that comes from fishing some bigger rivers that at bigger levels.
You learn a lot that way too, because then you can take that. Well, the comfort level of even casting bigger, heavier flies. I don't know. The next time that your small stream gets real big, or just the deeper section in your medium stream. We're talking about nymphing now, and the longer the time goes on, the more I see people just want to kind of force a really light game into like every nymphing situation. You're saying, Matt, like you're not in the zone. If trout want to eat above them and that's their focus, that's great. You're gonna have a good day, but you got to be ready to get down. For me, it isn't necessarily always the weight of the fly. You guys know I use split shot quite a bit, so whatever weight or whatever form your weight is in, big rivers are going to require more weight, let's say, on a regular basis. But it doesn't, for me, necessarily, you said it, Matt, it doesn't have to be a bigger fly.
Right.
Necessarily, right? And I definitely have gotten fooled into that. I fool myself into that. Even with streamers. And I was always thinking big rivers, you like to think big trout. Big rivers, big trout, I'm going to throw big flies. And over the years, I mean, I do love doing that from a boat.
Sure.
Not necessarily absurdly large streamers, but 4 inches, whereas around here I'm throwing 2 or 3 inches, and whatever, an inch makes a big difference. They don't have to be big though, and I found plenty of days. I'll tell you, I mean, everybody throws that now, right? And some of my favorites that are, are a little bit away from here, but I still get to fish them on a regular basis. Everybody's throwing that stuff. So just by backing off the size into something, let's say, more reasonable, the actual size of a sculpin down there, 2.5, 3 inches, I'll do better. I don't think the pattern selection needs to change as much as we want to think it does,
I think it depends on the river. So
Sure.
if the river has a lot more crayfish, but if the river has a bunch of really small bugs, you might have to do the opposite. Like you have to figure out what, you can scale up in bigger rivers, but it doesn't necessarily mean the food that's available to them is also scaled up. But maybe it has. And so like to your point with streamers, maybe there's, more minnows, more chubs, more fall fish. And so maybe you could get away with a bigger streamer. But there's some rivers, especially like tailwater systems, where it's the opposite.
Right.
Where you've got like midges and really small bugs. And so it's like the absolute opposite where it's like, okay, now you're fishing mostly 16s and 18s and even like down to 24s.
Dom, it reminds me of when we were in Patagonia.
Okay.
When we were fishing the famous minnow migration.
The minnow.
In what it was, a very large river. But our guide gave us a size 12 jig streamer, if you could call it that.
Nymph, you mean.
Which is completely opposite of maybe your instinct of what you would do in a large river, big flies, right? Yeah. Now we found the craft for jigless jiggy did just as well and or better.
It was 2.5 inches.
Yeah, it's just a huge juxtaposition with the size of river versus the food that's available that the fish are interested in.
Yeah, sure. And that is, I'm sure, what was going on was the minnow migration.
I'm sure of it.
The other thing, even though it's a big river, and I think we've kind of led to this, is it doesn't necessarily mean it's big targets. You still need a small, I guess, window to present the fly. You shouldn't be trying to cast, 40 feet across the river and then trying to do a nymph presentation with it. It's still, controlled and good presentations. Like spend the time to wade into position if you can, and put good presentations. I feel like big rivers, it makes people lazy real quick because it's a lot of effort to get from point A to point B. And so you're throwing longer casts because your legs are sore or that's versus like if you take the time to wade yourself into position, you're going to get a better cast.
So I want to tell you about Tajima Direct. They make the best polarized lenses on the market. Tajima gives me perfectly clear vision and more detail with less eye strain, so I see more fish. The process is simple. Take a pair of your sunglasses and send them in to Tajima. In short order, you'll get your frames back with your choice of lens tints that are specifically designed for fly fishing. With both prescription and non-prescription, Tajima's patented lens technology results in the best lenses I've ever worn, including every top brand out there. So I wear polarized lenses all day, every day, on the water. And I've been rotating in Tajima's brown 15 green mirror for average light days and their yellow-green 40 silver mirror for the cloudy low-light days that I love to fish. I can tell you that for me, having Tajima's prescription lenses in the right lens tints has been a game changer. I put my glasses on and I don't think about them again until the end of the trip. Send in your own frames today. Visit tajima-direct.com. That's TAJIMA-direct.com. Upgrade your lenses and see what you've been missing. Since 2006, Yeti has been building products for anglers who fish hard and share an addiction for the woods and the water. Yeti changed the industry with their legendary coolers by featuring rugged but simple designs built to last for generations and stand up to whatever Mother Nature might bring. Yeti now takes that same functional and elegant design to everything in their lineup, from soft coolers to drinkware bags and more. Introducing the Easy Access Ranchero Backpack. It's the latest to join Yeti's lineup of tough-as-nails bags, and it's another part of my fishing gear that keeps me organized and ready on the water. The Ranchero backpack features a cutting-edge rip-zip opening, so you can quickly tear the bag open to see the gear you need in just seconds. With smart internal organization, there's no more digging through your backpack for tippet spools or fly boxes. And for even more convenience, a handy vertical zipper allows you to grab gear at the bottom without having to unpack from the top. Get in, get out, and get going. Check out the Ranchero line of backpacks at Yeti.com or find them at a Yeti retailer store near you. Well, when it comes to nymphs, I feel like I can often get much longer drifts if I do let them go. I mean, let's say on a big river system, when I'm nymphing, I often will throw an indicator because I can't wade into position into good, what I call tight line range, one rod length over. It's always going to track towards your rod tip on a tight line. And so I'm not real big on casting 45 degrees across and trying to drift it 45 degrees down. It ends up just cross leading the whole time. If they want to eat it, great. Usually they don't for me. And to get a much better presentation than that, I throw an indicator on. And I do that a lot. It's one thing I look forward to when I'm going to a big river because I like fishing that way, but I don't find it to be it can be effective on a small and medium-sized river, but it's not my favorite thing to do for a variety of reasons. But one of those reasons is that I often can't get a long enough drift. I'm always running into something. And I'm just generalizing here, but I am saying that for me, a lot of the bigger rivers that I fish, I do get, let's say, a more even riverbed. A lot of times I'm not running into the next rock, the next boulder. I can get a drift that just goes longer because maybe I do have a riverbed that's just got some gravel, maybe even some sandy bottom, some silt, and whatever. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? You can get established down there in a zone underneath an indicator. You're pretty dang low because the indicator's going slower than the surface current. Things are going well. And you can just kind of keep it going or let it go. And I can mend and do whatever's necessary to keep the tension off that indicator. I love it. I can get, again, like 30, 40. I think 50 is really pushing it, but maybe I can get a 50-foot drift. If we were on a boat, we can get an endless drift. But we're talking about wading, and I can get these really long drifts under the indicator with a nymph. Now, how much of that drift is in actually down in their face? Maybe not a lot of it, but you're also covering a lot more water. Anyway, I love it. When that works, I really love it. But I can get enamored with that and just go, wow, look how long that drift is. But then I'm not catching any fish either. So I have to kind of keep myself in check. And what am I out there to do? Catch a fish or get long drifts? And, it makes a lot more sense to try something, see if it's working. If it's not, then I got to change my plan. Not get caught up in long drifts just because it's a big river. Like you said, Bill, I got to keep my targets, close, tight, planned out, figure it out.
See, Dom, that's what I say when I'm fishing streamers.
What's that,
Are
buddy?
you out here to catch fish? Or throw a streamer.
You should just go fishing with Deli.
call
Deli
back.
would show you how to fish streamers.
We fished streamers when we were in Montana. We caught fish,
No, yeah.
but it was mud. We were hitting
Just
mud
not
plugs.
as many.
We were hitting mud
Just
plugs.
not as many. Yeah. Oh.
What would you say though, Matt, when people would say you're not going to catch as big of a fish on a nymph?
That's crazy.
Bullshit, huh?
Like I said, look at all the Instagram feeds we talk about, right? It's not like there's a million people throwing up the namers all the time, right?
Oh, with streamers. People could also look
just
at
anywhere. I don't care if
Right.
it's a nymph or a streamer.
I thought you're talking about your Instagram feed or whatever. You don't actually post all your big fish, but I mean, we see in our group chat, we see a lot of the big fish you catch on
Sure.
nymphs, and they're just as big, if not bigger, than streamer caught fish on a regular basis.
Yep. And I think with that, like big rivers, right? We often the big fish thing becomes at least an opportunity. And Dell was just talking about one of the rivers me and him fished out here. And I would say, the right approach is throwing streamers because it's just very hard when you're fishing out of a boat to present a nymph in a small window, when you're drifting by, not all the time, but a lot of the time. And to be more effective in the presentation, there's no question a streamer is going to be, I don't know, I feel like it's more probable that you're going to hook into some of those big fish because of the terrain you're covering. And so I often think that's why people catch, they associate big flies with big fish on big rivers. It's just it just so happens that that's the best approach because you're trying to cover a large swath of water and they're eating those flies. But if you could get that nymph to that fish at the same time, I bet 9 times out of 10 it would eat that nymph just like it ate that streamer.
Della, you and I talked about this one time. If we're on if I know I'm going to get 2 days on a river that, let's say, I've never fished, and let's say it's a bigger one, I'll often fish streamers for a good chunk of that first day and try to learn something about it. And you were talking about that early on, like just trying to learn something by covering water. And I cannot sit still when I'm fishing streamers. I'm going to keep moving one way or the other. I'm moving up or down or over or whatever. So just by the tools that are in my hand, it forces me to cover water. I learn something, what's around the next bend. Then you can come back, I don't know, if you got a second day or just in the evening or whatever, a second shift, you come back and say, all right, you know what? I'm finding fish, this or that. Maybe even you're not getting looks, but you've now learned something about the structure and the way that the water moves in that river.
Yeah, I think that's that's where I said earlier about like just learning the terrain, because you don't know if it's a new to you river and you're like, oh, well, I didn't realize there's this big fish bucket around the bend that I missed because I got enamored with this, this nice little flat run that I thought was, I should be able to nymph a couple fish out of it. But if I threw streamers, I might only make 8 or 10 casts and then I'd keep moving. At least when you first start out, I would say look at maps and try to, you can look at Google Maps and you can go to satellite view and you can see like what's a ripple, what's a pool, and then you can see an island. Like we've all kind of mentioned islands. Like if it's a really big river,
4-pounders,
you can start to break that up with islands, and islands also usually create structure. And trout like structure. And so that's usually like an easy button. Like, hey, go fish this island because it might be easy. It's probably going to be easier to navigate, probably has structure.
Josh, you were saying that earlier about, finding where it breaks up. That is kind of an easy button.
Yeah. Islands, confluences, other water sources.
Yeah. One thing, if the water's a little high, those island sections, now the water's compressed into those channels. You know what I mean? It can be really ripping through there.
That could be tough.
Yeah, that might be the wrong decision.
Or like impossible.
Yeah, right. Anything else, guys?
Yeah, the last thing I would say is just fish it. I like bigger rivers. Same thing with like smaller or medium size. Fish them in the extremes. Fish them extremely low. You can probably get around more, get around easier. You start to see like what's under the river in places when it dries up with their structure. And then fish them on the high end if you can with a boat, because those different situations will kind of bottleneck the trout where they don't have the full river at their exposure.
Right. We were talking about that a little bit last week with the reading the river like a trout. And I said how Pat always said, just let's fish it at the lowest flows. That bottleneck, that's a good way to put it.
He loved that.
Right, he was good at it.
He loved low flow. He was the sniper when it came to that.
Talking about being patient. That Pat would do that, as we all know. If he found that one spot, he's like, "That's where I'm going to be. I'll see you guys later. You can go up or down. I'm going to be right here." And he'd cycle it, and he'd catch the fish to prove it was a good choice.
That's a good point, man. Low river, because that happens to most of our rivers, and you can really get to know that river when it's at its lowest. And then, it's a completely different story most of the year, but that's a good tactic to have.
Or just ask Matt to take you on a boat ride.
Yeah, you got to be able to row. Don't be a bad rower.
Tugboat.
If you're a good rower, get in touch with
you're good. Yeah.
Grove. You're looking for a good boat buddy.
Got to pull your weight.
Yeah, don't drink too much, right?
I can't be out of position. I'll be pissed.
What were you going to say, Del? I interrupted you.
I was going to say tugboats.
Matt's looking for a tugboat captain. No, he's the captain. What's the?
I'm the captain.
First mate. He's looking for a tugboat.
I'm looking for a first mate
on his tugboat.
This podcast is bad.
All right, who's got the readout? Anybody want to volunteer?
I got it. I can do it.
Hey, Matt Grove, will you read us out?
Remember, the Troutbitten Project is a free resource for all anglers. The Troutbitten website hosts over 1,500 articles, videos, and podcasts with endless stories, commentaries, tactics, tips, and more. Find what you like through the top menu and through the search page. Navigate by way of the categories and tags too. Be sure to find the Troutbitten YouTube channel, now featuring the Troutbitten Tips series, Fly Fishing the Mono Rig, and the Troutbitten Fly Box, all in collaboration with Wilds Media. You'll also find the Fish and Film videos and the new Riverside series, all in their own playlists on Troutbitten YouTube. Thank you for listening to the Troutbitten podcast. Please give the show a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leave a comment, because that really helps. Until next time, friends, fish hard, enjoy the day, and find your life on the water. Dom, that's what I say when I'm fishing streamers.
What's that, buddy?
Are you out here to catch fish or throw a streamer?
Oh, boy.